Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, in a tiny cottage at the edge of a misty forest, lived a boy named Jack and his mother. The roof leaked when it rained, the wind whistled through the broken windows, and the cupboard had forgotten what it felt like to hold food. But every morning, Jack woke up with a hopeful heart, believing something good was bound to happen. One day, the only thing they owned was a cow named Daisy. She was old, tired, and gave less milk with each passing day. Still, Jack loved her more than anything, for she reminded him of better times when laughter filled the house and soup simmered on the fire. But hunger doesn't wait for hope. One morning, Jack's mother handed him the last coin they had, smaller than a button and worn smooth by years of desperation. She looked at him, her eyes deep pools of worry, and asked him to go to the market, not to buy food, but to sell Daisy. Jack's heart ached as he led the cow down the winding path. Each step away from the cottage felt heavier than the last. How could he trade away his only friend? And then, just before the market came into view, a curious old man appeared on the road. His coat shimmered like stardust, and his eyes sparkled as if they knew secrets no one else did. He offered Jack a trade. Not for coins, not for gold, but for 5 beans. Not ordinary beans, he promised. Magic beans. Jack hesitated. Magic sounded like the stuff of bedtime stories, but so did happiness these days. And if this man was wrong, well, they had nothing left to lose. That night, Jack showed his mother the beans. Her silence was heavier than any scolding. She tossed the beans outside the window and turned away, her heart breaking in ways Jack couldn't see. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining what life would be like if those beans really were magic. He dreamed of skies filled with castles and clouds made of cream, treasures glittering behind every locked door. When the morning light slipped through the window, Jack's breath caught. Outside, a colossal beanstalk twisted into the sky, climbing higher and higher until it vanished into the clouds. It was real. The beans were magic. Without thinking, without even breakfast, Jack ran outside and grabbed the thick stalk. It was strong, cool to the touch, and alive with possibility. Up he climbed, higher than the birds, past the clouds, into the unknown. His hands ached, his legs trembled, but he kept going, not because he wanted adventure, but because he had nothing left. And something deep inside him whispered that everything he needed was at the top. When he finally reached the summit, his eyes widened. There, stretched across the clouds, was a land like no other. Trees grew gold leaves, streams flowed with honey, and in the distance a castle, massive and gleaming, guarded by gates taller than any tower he'd ever seen. But castles don't sit quietly in the sky for no reason. Jack was about to discover that magic always comes with a price, and giants cast long shadows, the castle of shadows. Jack stood at the edge of the cloudy kingdom, heart thumping like a drum. The castle before him was silent, yet it pulsed with something ancient. Its walls were carved from ivory stone, its windows the size of houses, and its doors impossibly huge. It was the kind of place that whispered both wonder and danger in the same breath. He crept toward the entrance, careful not to disturb the silence. Each step echoed like thunder in the strange softness of the cloud ground. And as he slipped through a crack in the massive gate, his eyes adjusted to the dim glow inside. It was a world of giants. Everything was enormous, the furniture, the paintings, even the fireplace was big enough to roast a dragon. Jack hid behind a golden pillar, barely breathing. Then the sound came heavy, slow, and growing louder with every second. A booming thud. Thud. Thud! Like the heartbeat of a mountain, a giant appeared. Twice as tall as a tree and as wide as a barn door, the creature stomped into the room, carrying a golden harp in one hand and a cage in the other. Inside the cage fluttered a golden feathered hen. Jack watched from his hiding spot as the giant placed the hen on a table. With a single command, the hen clucked and laid a golden egg. Then the giant yawned, stretched, and muttered something about flesh and bones before collapsing into a deep sleep that shook the floor. Jack's eyes were fixed on the hen. That hen could change everything. No more hunger, no more sorrow, no more selling the last of what they had just to survive. But stealing from a giant was no small thing. He waited until the giant's snores roared through the castle like thunder. Then, heart pounding, he tiptoed toward the table. One step, two. The hen stirred but didn't cry. He grabbed the cage, held it tight, and ran. Silent as moonlight, swift as a dream. Outside, the beanstalk stood waiting. He scrambled down with the cage tied to his back, every leaf a challenge, every gust of wind a reminder that one slip could end it all. At last, he reached the ground. He fell to his knees, laughing, crying, clutching the golden hen like a miracle. His mother rushed outside, disbelief in her eyes as the hen laid a golden egg right there on the grass. That day, the cottage lit up with a joy it hadn't seen in years. But Jack, he couldn't forget the harp, the way it glowed, the way it hummed softly like it had a soul. He had climbed once for survival. Now he felt something deeper stirring, a longing not just for food or gold, but for something greater. The story wasn't over. Not yet. The days that followed felt like a dream. With each golden egg, life became easier. The cupboards were full again. The fire never went out. And Jack's mother began to smile in ways Jack had never seen. But even in comfort, something gnawed at Jack's heart. He couldn't stop thinking about the harp. It hadn't been just a treasure. It had sung to itself, its strings glowing with a soft light like fireflies. The sound had been alive, haunting, beautiful, almost magical. The harp had called to him, and even now, when the wind howled through the trees, he sometimes thought he heard its faint song riding the breeze. One quiet morning, long before the sun had fully risen, Jack stood at the base of the beanstalk once more. The hen clucked softly from inside the house as if it knew he was going. His mother slept peacefully. Jack tightened the straps on his satchel, took a deep breath, and began to climb. This time, the climb felt different. The sky was darker, the wind colder. The clouds above seemed heavier, more watchful. And when Jack reached the top, the castle loomed larger than he remembered, as if it had grown somehow, sensing his return. He waited until nightfall, hidden in the garden behind giant rose bushes whose thorns were longer than his arms. Then, under cover of stars, he crept through the castle gate. The halls were dim, lit by strange, floating orbs of light that pulsed gently like sleepy fireflies. Shadows danced along the walls. And somewhere deeper in the castle, Jack heard it, the harp's song, a melody that twisted gently through the air, soft and sorrowful. It led him to a chamber bigger than a meadow, with pillars so tall they vanished into mist. There, on a marble pedestal, sat the harp, glowing, singing, waiting. But he wasn't alone. The giant was there too, snoring in a throne carved from a single boulder. A massive hound lay at his feet, its eyes shut, but its ears twitching. One wrong move, and Jack wouldn't just fail. He might not make it out at all. He crept forward, step by step, timing each move with the giant's snores. Closer, closer. His fingers touched the harp, and in that moment, the music stopped. The harp opened its eyes. Yes, eyes soft, golden and filled with a sadness that struck Jack's heart like a bell. The harp blinked once, then it whispered, barely audible, "Take me home." Jack lifted the harp gently, careful not to let it strum. But the moment he turned to leave, the harp cried out, not in fear, in joy. A single note rang out, bright as sunlight, and the giant's eyes snapped open. The castle erupted into thunder. The giant roared, leaping from his throne with a fury that shook the walls. The hound barked, loud enough to crack stone. Jack ran, harp in his arms, legs pumping like fire. Through hallways, under tables, out the gate, the beanstalk in sight. But the giant was behind him, closer than before. Each step a quake, each roar a storm. Jack dove onto the beanstalk, gripping it with one hand while the other held the harp tight. The climb down was chaos. The wind screamed, the stalk swayed, and the giant's hand almost caught his foot. But down he went, faster than ever before, the harp's song growing louder with every leaf he passed. And then, the ground. He hit the earth, rolled to his feet, and screamed for his mother. She came rushing from the house, eyes wide, and together they grabbed an axe. The giant began to descend. Jack swung, once, twice, and on the third strike, the beanstalk cracked. It toppled like a falling mountain, and the giant crashed down with it, vanishing into the earth with a thunder that shook the hills. Silence, then birdsong. The harp in Jack's arms hummed softly, resting against his chest like a tired child. Its song was warm now, grateful. He had done it. Not just for gold, not just for survival, but because deep down he had heard something no one else had, the voice of something forgotten, something magical, calling for help. And he had answered. The days after the fall of the Beanstalk were filled with wonder, not just because the giant was gone or because gold flowed freely from the hen, but because of what the harp began to do. It didn't just play music, it told stories. At first, it was just soft melodies, lullabies that made flowers bloom in the window box, tunes that cleared clouds from the sky. But soon it began to sing of things Jack had never known. Ancient lands beyond the mountains, creatures that lived in light, and kings who ruled not with swords but with songs. One evening, as the sun bled into the hills, the harp played a melody so beautiful it brought tears to Jack's mother's eyes. She leaned against the doorframe, listening in silence. And then the harp spoke. Not in words, not exactly, but in feelings, pictures that bloomed inside Jack's mind like firecrackers. A woman in a forest, tall and radiant, playing the harp to a circle of golden birds. A man with eyes like Jack's, hiding the harp inside a tree as shadows crept in. A chase, a theft, a fall. It wasn't just a magical object. It had once belonged to Jack's family, stolen generations ago, taken to the world of giants. That's why it had sung to him. That's why its notes had filled his chest with warmth. It wasn't just a treasure, it was home. From that day on, Jack and the harp became inseparable. He would walk to the village square, carrying it on his back, and play for the people. Not for coin, but for joy. The music healed. It soothed old wounds. It stitched laughter into tired souls. The harp taught Jack not just to survive, but to live, and life changed. The villagers who once turned away from Jack and his mother now knocked gently on their door with gifts, warm bread, wool, fresh vegetables, not because they wanted something, but because they remembered what it meant to care. Children gathered at Jack's feet to hear the harp's lullabies. Farmers finished their work early just to sit in the evening sun and let the music soak into their bones. And even the old widow down the lane, who hadn't spoken in years, began to hum again. Jack never climbed another beanstalk. He didn't need to. Everything he was looking for, the wonder, the magic, the treasure, had been inside him all along. It just needed a melody to bring it out. Well, the final hook years later, when Jack was old and the harp strings had turned silver, people still told his story, not as the boy who stole from a giant, but as the boy who listened, really listened to the whisper of a harp, and changed the world with a song.